morning, good afternoon, good evening, praise God, wherever you are. I wish you a welcome to Logos for Life. If you have been around, I wish you a welcome back. If it's your first time, feel free to enjoy this topic and also feel free to share with others, and especially those who have never known about this channel so that we can be many. My name is Kapongo Kalonda, and I'm going to speak about youth and lifestyle. And you might wonder, why am I going to speak about youth and lifestyle? I'm going to speak about youth because unless you don't know, as many people believe, youth is the hope for the future of a nation, the hope for the future of an institution. There are so many quotations out there, so many says that confirms that there is hope, a better hope for a nation or for an institution when there is the provision of youth, of young people, and especially those who are well-trained, those who are well-cultivated. That's why we are going to speak about the youth side, because Christian youth are important people for the kingdom of heaven. We are in need of youth. The church needs youth to come help those who are there, and after they are no more, to continue serving, and the cycle continue, so and so on. So if you are a youth and you are following me, understand that you are an important person to the kingdom of heaven for its advancement. And you will understand why, as I will be giving examples of people who have done tremendous work in the Bible and who are youth. Maybe you didn't know, but you will now confirm with me that they were youth. And why will I be speaking about lifestyle? As I've said, that there is a better hope. There is hope for a good future for an institution when there is first the provision of youth, but also youth who are well trained, because you can still have youth, but if they are not people of character, they are not well trained, that hope might not lead us exactly to a true reality of success in future. That is where we'll be speaking about lifestyle. What is the lifestyle that Christ is expecting from Christian youth? That's what we'll be talking. So we show these are the people that are youth, and this is the lifestyle that Christ is expecting from these youth, so that not only this youth can be a blessing to the society, to their family, to the institution that they will work on, but also a blessing to the kingdom of heaven. And those youth are Christian. That's why I'm addressing you. We shall see things in details, but that is the reason why I'm speaking about this. Now, the first question is, who is a youth? Because my topic is just composed of two major words, keyword, youth and lifestyle. Who is a youth? By listening to others and reading, I came across two understanding of who a youth is, or two beliefs. There is one category. It's the category of people who define a youth person as a person who has certain attitude or mindset. So they believe that youth or youthness is all regarding or all about mindset, certain attitude, not about age. So they define youth as a person who has a positive mindset, a person who still sets goals, good goals for his life, a person who doesn't give up, a person who is hardworking, a person who has a sense of learning again. Yes, that is how they define it. And they will go and say a person who still can live a life of forgiving others, a person who is this and that. They say even if you are 80 years old, 50 years old, you are still a youth person, as long as your attitude is positive toward life. So have you heard? That is what they believe. And there is another group of people who believe that youthness is determined by the number of age. And I will give you an example. For example, the United Nations institution define a youth person as a person who is aged between 15 years old and 24 years old. So for them, it's about the number of age. You go to the African Union Youth Charter, they define a youth person as a person living or aged between 15 and 35 years old. To finish this, I will add also an example of the Kenyan constitution that define in its article 260 that a youth person is a person who is between the age of 18 years old to 34 years old. So these are institution, and you can add more, please. You can comment even in that section of comments. Which institution you know that define youth according to this or that? You can still tell me what you do think about the definition. So, according to me, as a Christian, who is a youth? What is the right understanding that we can go with it at home as we are learning about this topic? I will say I agree with those who are defining youth according to the age. But I will give the limit that I think that a youth will be there. And please consider this. Speaking of this topic, or as I'm presenting this topic, I will be addressing the people who are in their late teens to the late youth. So there will be that, that provision, though the title is youth. So personally, I support those who are saying that the definition or the concept of youth is linked to the age because of what I have read in the Bible. When the Bible has addressed people as young, people as youth, what was it referring to? And after reading many examples, I have come to the conclusion that the Bible, when it uses the word youth or young, it refers to the number of years. But what is the gap? That is what we are going to see. For example, I will start with the example of David, the word that was used there. When you read 1 Samuel 17:33, this is Saul speaking to David. Here he has told David to put clothes to go and fight Goliath. This is what he says: "You are not able to go out against this Philistine. You are only a young man. You are only a youth." The word that he used, that we read a young man, is the word na'ar. And that word in the Hebrew language was used to define a youth or a young man. So that word, in other words, we'll say it means boy, it means youth, it means young man. But when we look to the story, we will ask our question: how old was David when King Saul referred to him as a youth, or as a boy, or as a young man? At this time, of course, we'll go deeper in scripture later, David was around 15 to 17 years old. So keep that in mind. Why am I saying that? I am supporting the age because of the second example that I'm going to give you. This is the example of Timothy. When you read 1 Timothy, chapter 4:12, Paul speaks or wrote to Timothy, and he says this: "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." Other verses we say youth, as I was saying it. So the word used there by Apostle Paul, it is called neotes, Neotes, and that word was used to indicate or to determine or to speak to people who are young. The question now is, how old was Timothy when Apostle Paul referred to him as a youth, as a young person? According to the history that is available, Timothy was between 30 to 35 years old when Paul is referring to him as a young person, as a youth. So we have David, who is being referred as a young person, as a youth, when he was 15 to 17. And now we have Pastor Timothy, because he was already a pastor here, who is 30 to 35. Why? Because Timothy was born in AD 30. The letter that is being written to him was written around AD 65. So when you do the mathematics, you get that he was around 35 years old when he's still being referred as young person. The same will go for Paul. When the Bible is referring to Paul in the book of Acts as a young person standing by, keeping the cloth of those people who were stoning Stephen, Paul was around 30 years old. So he was between 28 to 30 years old. I will add to it the story about Joshua, who came to be the assistant of Moses as a young person. And when you calculate the age of Joshua at that time, you will find that Joshua was 38 years old. Why? Because by the time he's being sent to go and be the spy, the Bible shows us clearly that he was 40 years. But he became Moses' assistant 2 years before, and that means he was 38 years old. And we can agree that there are so many examples, but I have less time. I can tell you about Daniel and his friend. The Bible referred to them as young men. That is in the book of Daniel chapter 1 to 18. The Bible says, 3 to 4, it says, Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king his service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, answer showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed. Let's just take the young men without any physical. So there is the word young men. When you go to history, you'll understand that the young people who are to be trained were people between 14 to 17 years old. It was before 20 years old. That's why they are not in the army, they are not in any other service. Why? Because they are considered young. So that is another example of the age. When the Bible refers to some people as young, it is either they're in the late teenage or they're in the youth part, which starts around 20 years old and will continue to the late 30s. Why am I saying around 20 years old? Because David was referred to as a young person, was not in the army because he was in his late teenage, what confirms at that time in the kingdom of Israel, from 20 years old, people were already getting enrolled already in the army. But you see, David was not yet in the army, which was confirming that he was less than 20 years old and, of course, in his late teens. So the same thing here with Daniel. Now you understand why I'm saying that. For me, the definition of who is a youth is linked to the number of age or the years. So it is not about the attitude rather than the number of age. So according to me, who is a youth? When I will be speaking throughout this topic using the word youth, I will be referring to the person between the age of 15 years old to the late 30s. That is 38, 39. So if you are in that gap, consider yourself a youth person. You might be single, you might be married, you might be in school, you are still in school, or you are already working, you are jobless. If you are just in that gap of age, for me, you are a youth person. That is the person that I will be addressing this message to. And on top of that, people that I will be using the examples as youth in the Bible are people who will be in that gap of age or have started their activities during that period of age. Now that we have defined who is a youth, of course, the next question is, who are the youth that we have in the Bible, and what have they done? What have they achieved? How have they lived? So I will start first with who are they. I will give you the example of Joshua. Joshua became Moses' assistant at the age of 38. He was sent to the espionage mission at the age of 40. And he became Israel leader at the age of 78. I want you will understand why I have added the 78, though at that time he was no more youth. Who is the second youth? David. Of course, I spoke about him. David is mentioned in the Bible in 1 Samuel 16:11 at the age of 15 to 17. That is where he is anointed. At the age of 20 years old, he is enrolled in the army. And at the age of 30 years old, he became the king of Judah. And now at the age of 37 years old, he became the king of the entire Israel. Can you notice that he was still youth? And there are so many history after that. Whatever I've said is, you can find it in the Bible. At the age of 20 years old, he enrolled in the army. That is 1 Samuel 17:33. That is when Saul is even speaking to him. He became king of Judah at 30 years old. That is 2 Samuel chapter 2:4. It is stated there. At the age of 37, he became king over the entire Israel. That is 2 Samuel 5:1-5. Please read it, and you can confirm that. I come to Daniel and his friend. Of course, I've already explained about that. That is Daniel 1:1-4. You can confirm that. The other youth that we see in the Bible is Jesus. And if you didn't know, Jesus was youth, unless you might have been reading the Bible and assuming Jesus was a person because of all that he achieved. Jesus was still a youth, and his mentions, I will just take some highlights of his life in the Bible. At the age of 12 years old, he had a great knowledge, and he was full of wisdom that brought the attention of so many people toward him. And you could see and remember the story of him arguing or discussing with the specialist of the law of the law in the temple. When you keep reading, you will notice that Jesus became a minister at around the age of 30. I'm saying about around because there are still debates where we can say that he started at 28, 29, but we always, round it to 30 years old. And something special, Jesus achieved all his work here on earth. Other people can say he achieved his entire purpose on earth at the age of 33. After Jesus, I have Paul. I said it before. Paul is mentioned as a youth who studied in Jerusalem under Gamaliel between the age of 15 to 25 years old. And he assisted at the stoning of Stephen. You will find it in the book of Acts, chapter 22. You'll find it in Galatians, chapter 1:11, going up, because he spoke about it. And the Bible also referred to him, as I said, as a young man when it mentioned him for the first time. At that time, he was not called Paul. He was called Saul. There is Saul there. And we have Timothy. I've spoken about Timothy, who, of course, this is an interesting story. Timothy, who is born in around AD 30, received Christ in his late teenage, around 17 years old, who by 20 years old, when he is entering, like he has completely shifted from late teenage now to youth, started to work with Paul. This is what is written about his life. That is in the book of Acts chapter 16, 1-5. It says, Paul came to Derbe and then to Lystra, where a disciple named Timothy lived, whose mother was Jewish and a believer, but whose father was a Greek. The believers at Lystra and Iconium spoke well of him. Paul wanted to take him along on the journey, so he circumcised him because of the Jews who lived in the area, for they all knew that his father was a Greek, as they traveled from town to town. So, you see, Timothy received Christ around 17 years old and start the work of ministry with Paul at the age of 20 years old. And those are the few examples I wanted to give you about the youth that we found in the Bible. Now, as I said, why have I brought these examples? Because we want to look to their lifestyle. we want to look to the recommendation that were given to them, because these youth were not only youth, they were exceptional youth. They did great, they succeeded. So, linked to their life or linked to their testimonies that we are reading in the Bible, there is a lifestyle that has helped them to achieve this much. And that lifestyle is what Christ has been expecting from us. So we are going to look to their lifestyle and learn from them for us to know what kind of lifestyle in today's world Christ is expecting his youth believers to live, for them to be a blessing to the society, a blessing to their families, a blessing to their own lives, a blessing to the kingdom of heaven.